All right, we're going to finish this chapter 23 PowerPoint. We had just finished. Hopefully you were able to join and watch some examples of the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. If you still need some more help with that, please let me know. I will see you guys again on Thursday at 11:30. Like I told the people that met today, we will have to meet for questions and check in and hi and all of that. But when I do the lesson, I can't record it and have your faces on there because of some privacy issues. So I'm gonna have to do lessons this way for now. And actually it's better because if you're not able to be up at this time or if you're working, you can come back and watch later. So we talked about Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, and the whole idea of this when Hardy and Weinberg came up with it was that it was an equation to prove that evolution is not occurring. There is no evolution going on. So if evolution is not occurring, then that means no changes are going to happen. We're going to have the same frequency for every trait generation after generation. In real populations, this doesn't happen. We change all the time. Humans are getting taller, our skin color's changing, all sorts of things are changing with us all the time. So the whole purpose of this is really just to watch for change. We can figure out the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium for right now for a certain trait, and then we can go back in 20 years and calculate it again and see how much things are changing. And this would be important to track genetic diseases, to track all sorts of things. So in order for Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium to be accurate, these things would have to happen. First, we would have to have no mutations at all. Can you guys think of a world in which we wouldn't have any mutations? Mutations happen all the time. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, but they happen all the time. We would also have to have random mating in order for no evolution to occur. Now these are all no evolution at all. From my daughter's handwriting, that's terrible. Anyway, so no mutations, we couldn't have any absolutely at all. We would have to have random mating. And what that means is that it would be like fish or coral or jellyfish or a lot of aquatic animals where you just lay your eggs and then some random male comes along and fertilizes them. There's no choice in it. You're just throwing your gametes to the wind, if you will. And that wouldn't work really well here on land. Could we just throw sperm in the air and hope it met an egg? That's not going to work. But that would be needed for a not evolving population to happen. We would have no natural selection. So there would be no best traits determine who is the best at surviving. We would have to have an extremely large population because when you have small populations, you see those changes easier. And we would have to have no gene flow, so no movement in or out of the population. Everybody's just trapped there. Kind of like we are in our houses right now. So looking at some of these, oops, let me delete this. I don't know if you guys can see this because they said earlier that my writing wasn't showing up. This is all a mystery to me. I'm trying. Anyway, so PKU, this is a genetic disease where you cannot break down a amino acid called phenylalanine. And this could kill you. It can be a buildup of that amino acid, can cause brain damage, can cause all sorts of bad things. So we know that this is in Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium because the mutation rate is really, really low. It stays exactly where it is. And we are kind of randomly mating in terms of this one gene because it's not like you say, hey, baby, are you a carrier for PKU? That's not like a dating question. So it is kind of random mating in that fact that you may not even know if you're a carrier for this. Natural selection can only occur on those few individuals that have it. and they don't follow dietary restrictions. It's pretty easy to live with this genetic disease with no problem. The population is large, and migration has no factor in this whatsoever because it's the same pretty much all over the world. So if you looked at PKU, remember like we just did a minute ago, here is our, it says it is occurring 1 in every 10,000 births. So if you do 1 divided by 10,000, you get 0.0001. That is our Q squared, because we said the occurrence of individuals with PKU is 1 in 10,000 births. So then to get from Q squared to Q, you would just take the square root. Then, because P plus Q equals 1, we could take 1 minus Q, and we find out that P is 0.99. Then we can figure out the carriers, 0.0198, which is roughly 2% of the US population is carrying PKU and has no idea whatsoever. And this would be something important to watch, because if that rate of carriers increases or the rate of PKU increases, then perhaps we need to look at genetic testing for this, because we don't want a whole bunch of kids that have to be on special diets just to survive. Now, moving on to explain some of these a little bit more. I'm fairly certain you guys have natural selection down. It is not that complicated. Natural selection, if you remember, is survival of the fittest. Somebody's going to have some trait that's going to allow them to survive, but we are going to talk more about genetic drift and gene flow. So just briefly for the natural selection. Natural selection is the idea that if you have the best traits, then you're going to survive and you're going to pass that trait on to your offspring. So DDT was a common pesticide that we used on crops for a long time until we found out that it's really bad for us. But fruit flies, they had a resistance to DDT. They didn't ask for it. They just had a mutation so that DDT didn't kill them. That's going to be natural selection right there, because they have the best traits for being a fruit fly. It's not great for us because we don't want these little buggers around, but the ones that had the resistance could actually survive and pass those genes on to their offspring. Genetic drift is a little different. Hey, shh, lay down. Sorry, my dog's acting crazy. Hey, come here. So genetic drift describes how allele frequencies fluctuate from one generation to the next. So if you have, my coworker here is being very distracting. So if you look at this population here on the next slide, here we have a bunch of flowers. You can see if they have CR, CR, they're red, CR, CW, they're pink, CW, CW, they are white. And you can see in generation 1, they have a frequency of 0.7 for the red allele and a frequency of 0.3 for the white allele. Now by generation 2, we've had 5 plants have offspring, and oh, what has changed? We've definitely seen a decrease in the rate of the P allele and an increase in the rate of the white allele. And then if only 2 of these offspring reproduce, then we could end up with all of them turning red. So it all depends on who is passing on those traits, how the alleles fluctuate from one generation to the next. And this is just chance. It's just whoever gets the opportunity to reproduce is going to change the traits. Like for instance, if only redheads could mate, then that would significantly change the frequencies in a population. I do want you guys to watch this because it's showing a good one, good little description of all of these different terms in terms of like a beetle or something. Apparently they're different colors. I don't know. That's the same to me. Hey, hush. Come here, lay down. My coworker is very annoying. Lay down. Hey. This also is good, showing some more video animation of evolutionary change. Founder effect is something, hold on one second. You're driving me crazy. Founder effect is when a couple of individuals in a population end up going off and forming a different population. So for these guys, it all depends on who is the founder. If only blonde-haired people went off and founded a new country back when we were all migrating, then we would only have the blonde alleles carrying into that population. So really, if you're going to discover a new area, you'd want a good representation of all your traits and not just certain traits, because the new population that comes afterwards is only going to have those alleles. Look what happened. Oof. If you look at this picture, it is showing you blood typing. We already went over blood typing, A, B, and O. Did you know that B is the rarest blood type on the planet? Only 16% of humanity has it. I have it, which is why I'm so unique and amazing. So if we look, the majority of the B alleles, look over here in North America. We have a whole lot of B alleles. Oh my. Where is the majority of the B alleles? Right over in this area. So what does that tell you? If we don't have a whole lot of B alleles, do you guys remember how North America was founded? Where did they come from? We'll look at that in 1 second. Let's look at A. A blood type, same situation. It's also pretty rare, only about 20% of the population. We see it a little bit more dispersed, very prevalent over in the European areas, but still that's 20% for A and 16% for B. That's not very many. Oh, this is the most common blood type. 63% of humans have it. They, from analyzing Cro-Magnons and Neanderthals that they have found, they found that they also had O blood. The majority of Native Americans have O blood. So what does that tell you about the founder effect? If we look over here on this part of the map, wrong button. I hope I can do this without messing up. I don't know, hopefully you can't see that because I don't know where I'm from. Anyway, over here, we have a pretty high prevalence, I think I'm matching the color right, of O blood. And if you remember, right where I have my star here, this was attached to North America. It was attached over here. Do you remember the Bering Strait and the land bridge? So if we had people with type O blood moving through, and they're going to cross from Siberia into North America. And if we go back 1 slide and we see that the majority of people that were over in that Siberia area, they were actually type O blood. It's not surprising that the majority of Native Americans have type O blood, because the founders, the ones that came over and actually moved into this continent, had type O blood. So see, you can see this with blood typing. Pretty cool, huh? Bottleneck. Now, this is when we have some sort of sudden change. If we had, let's say that this pandemic we have going on, let's say it was much, much more severe than it is. Let's pray that this never happens, but let's say that it has a very, very high death rate and it's killing off lots of people at the same time. All of a sudden, our population is going to decrease, correct? And if all of a sudden our population decreases, then we are going to end up with a different allele frequency than we had to begin with. Only the individuals that are left are going to be able to reproduce, and then they're going to pass on their traits. So look at this population here. We've got blue marbles, let's say, and white marbles, and I think that's yellow marbles. That's the original population, a big combination of all those colors. If we had a bottleneck event, that means a whole bunch of individuals were actually removed from the population, and this is all that's left. Our surviving population would not be very big, and we would actually have lost the yellow trait. So this has definitely changed our overall population. Now we do not have the yellow allele anymore, and only the blue and the white are going to be able to reproduce. So that has caused a change. There was actually a very crazy scenario, unfortunately. In the 1600s, there was a guy named Bogdan Jimilioviana, and he had led a massacre that killed all the Polish people. He killed the peasants and the noblemen and the Jewish people. He was really mad and initiated this because some Polish noblemen had taken all of his possessions. So he killed thousands of people. And the Jewish population in the Ukraine went down to only a few thousand people. Then the Jewish population recovered and started going back up again. And unfortunately, then we hit 1939, where we had Hitler. So in this situation, you would have had a large population, everybody's groovy. Bogdan came along and dropped the population down. They started growing again and getting bigger. And then Hitler came along and dropped the population again. So we went from a large population to a small population to a large population again, back to a small population. When you do this, when you have a bottleneck event, it is going to significantly change the frequency of alleles in your population. So this is just more on genetic drift. You can read through there. Genetic drift is going to be really important if you have a small population. If you have 10 million people living in an area, who's moving in or moving out is not going to be that big of a deal. It can cause allele frequencies to change. It's going to lead to genetic variation, maybe good, maybe bad, and it can cause harmful alleles to become more prominent in a population. If you look at a group like the Ashkenazi Jews, it is a very orthodox sect of Judaism, and they have a very small population, and they have a whole lot of harmful alleles in their population because their population's been so small. And we had these different bottleneck events happening to the Jewish population throughout time. And finally, we have gene flow. This is just movement. Of course, when Native Americans were here, we had very particular alleles amongst the human population, dark hair, dark skin. And then when the Europeans came in, started introducing paler skin and paler hair. So gene flow, the movement of alleles, has changed that population over time. And those are some more examples of birds exhibiting gene flow. And then, of course, natural selection. New variations arise by chance, but if they're beneficial, then that organism is going to be able to survive better than individuals that don't have it. They're going to be able to reproduce and pass that trait on to their offspring. That's the whole idea of natural selection. You cannot choose it. You cannot order on Amazon the traits you want. You get what you get, and you don't throw a fit. You might die, but you can't throw a fit. So the last thing that I want to talk about for today is types of natural selection, because this is going to be on your worksheet for today. And these types of natural selection, still trying to get this stupid scribble mark off my computer. I hope you guys can't see it. Oh, now it went away. Yay. All right, so these different kinds of natural selection, directional, disruptive, and stabilizing natural selection, look like this, which I'm going to show you a little bit more in a second. You guys know a bell-shaped curve, right? A bell-shaped curve, you go up and you go back down. That's not very bell-like, but you get my idea. If you have a bell-shaped curve, that means that you have some individuals, a few individuals that are on the extreme of a population, and other individuals that are in the middle, the average traits. So teachers often look for this in grades. We want to have some A's, we want to have more B's. We expect the majority in a normal class to be C's, fewer to be D's, and then fewer still to be F's. This is a natural distribution. This is an average distribution. Now, we wouldn't expect this kind of result with an honors class because you've basically taken out this group of individuals in a honors class. So of course, you're going to see more of this. So what does that have to do with anything? Well, natural selection can change the distribution of traits. Maybe having the average version of a trait is not good. It's not helpful to you. And so the population is going to change in one of three ways. So if we look on the first one here, the black line here is showing the natural distribution, the bell-shaped curve. But then on the other one, you can see that this population shifted. Now, if you have these traits here, that's bad. For some reason, that's bad. All of those organisms died. And this example here on your paper is showing lighter colored mice. Maybe this is a rocky terrain where it's a lot of dark colors because of the rocks. And if you're a light colored mouse, what's going to happen to you? You're going to get eaten. So directional selection is when you shift, if you look without all my drawing on here, you shift from the black line to the red line, you've shifted direction. You've shifted this way. It's no longer beneficial to have the lighter colors. You're too easy to eat up. So it's more beneficial to have the darker colors so that you can survive. Another example of this is the human population. If you had a normal distribution of birth weight, then this would be about 6 to 8 pounds would be the average weight. And if you had 1 pound, what would happen? Before the last few years, if you had a 1 pound baby, that baby would not make it. If you had a 10 pound baby, and so the last 50 years or so, that baby wouldn't make it. It would get stuck in the birth canal. So 1 pound baby isn't developed enough and it will die. A 10 pound baby can get stuck and it will die. So it became that overall, we stayed more at that 6 to 8 pound region in babies because it was safer for the mother and safer for the baby. Now that's not the case anymore because they have had 1 pound babies survive, many of them. And if a baby's too big, they do C-sections. So even though our population of babies in the human population has moved to here, it may shift back now that we are helping out those mothers with the other situations. So this is directional selection. This is moving to one side or the other. Disruptive selection, now this, look again at the black. Right in the middle should be the majority of the organisms, but in this case, it's bad. Maybe we're in a rocky situation, so the dark mice can find success. They can hide in the dark rock, and it's snowy up there, so the really light ones can hide in the snow. But if you're not darker, you're not light, if you're in this region, you're not going to make it. You're not best fit to survive. So disruptive is when it's bad to be in the middle. And then stabilizing selection. Stabilizing selection, instead of being nice and spread out here, we will all be right in the middle. Let's say this is a mouse found on the beach. To be a middle color, kind of a tannish color would be good. White would stick out, dark would stick out, and they would get eaten. So that is how the population has changed. That's just some more examples of this. Here's another adaptation. Ah, look at that big old snake jaw. Since it can now move and the jaw can dislocate, they can get more food, bigger food that they couldn't get before, and they can have more nutrients, and that got passed on. Now here's something crazy, which you probably know about well anyway, but sexual selection. In a lot of bird populations, we see this sexual dimorphism. This is when there's a big difference between the boys and the girls. In every bird population, the colorful, the beautiful organisms are the males because they have to try to attract the ladies. The ladies are the more drab colors because they want to camouflage and take care of the nest. So in sexual selection, we're seeing natural selection. Whoever has the best traits survives and passes that on to their offspring. But now, instead of being fastest or strongest, it's going to be who is the prettiest. And there are two different kinds of selection, intrasexual, and this is when the males all compete for the females, and intersexual, and this is where the females are like, no, I don't like you, I don't like you, I don't like you. Oh, you have pretty tail feathers. So that's where the female gets to decide. If a male has prettier tail feathers, a better song, a better dance, then they're going to increase their likelihood of mating with a female and passing those traits on to the offspring, but it can also decrease his chance of survival because what if that attracts a predator when he's singing and dancing and carrying on? So is it more important to survive or mate? That's a tough decision. Usually the males go for mating, even if it does disrupt the possibility that they'll survive. Now, balancing selection with those of you guys that were at the Zoom earlier, this is when natural selection maintains a certain form of a phenotype because it's somehow an advantage. We talked when we were talking about the sickle cell problem about heterozygote advantage. Let's look at this. So here, the homozygotes, when we were talking about this during the Zoom, we used big S for being normal and little s for having sickle cell. Well, normal individuals don't have sickle cell, but they die of malaria. And sickle cell, they have sickle cell, but they can't get malaria. Ooh, that's an N. So each of these could die from something. They came to find that a heterozygous advantage, big S, little s, they don't have sickle cell and they can't get malaria. Their blood cells are just messed up enough that the malarial parasite cannot enter into the blood cells. So if we look at what this looks like, you can see there's an obvious difference in shape in a person with sickle cell. You're supposed to have these nice, floofy, donut-like red blood cells. And in sickle cell, because of a one base mutation, an adenine is replaced with a thymine. Whoa, just a substitution mutation. Now you have these elongated, stretched out, crescent-shaped red blood cells, and they can't travel through the capillaries very well, and they get clogged. So the heterozygotes in this situation, they don't have perfectly round blood cells, but they're just mutated enough that the malaria parasite cannot enter their cells, so they can't get sickle cell, they can't get malaria. But if you look over here at this Punnett square, if you have two heterozygotes, which is the desirable trait because they can't get either condition, what still happens 25% of the time? 25% of the time, you end up with an individual that has sickle cell, and they will die. They'll die early before passing on the trait to their offspring. So if you look here, the distribution of the sickle cell allele is higher in areas where there's a lot of malaria. And that's because it protects them from malaria to be a carrier. But unfortunately, 25% of the time, they're going to pass that on to their offspring. So natural selection cannot make a perfect organism. It only can act on existing organisms. We cannot order some sort of trait. Oftentimes, an adaptation is compromised, and sometimes it's bad. A mutation can make you sick and kill you. It is not order your nice genes. Not yet. Maybe with CRISPR coming, we'll be able to do that. So that is it for our notes for today. Please complete the POGL that is on the Google Classroom and return that to me on Google Classroom on Thursday. Thank you. Have a great day. My dogs are driving me crazy.